like how this will unfold today. We have about like 60 minutes. So the name of the game is that we will all step more enriched into the rest of our days in about an hour. So what I'll do in the beginning, I'll give a little bit of a frame why community is such a beautiful way to evolve a brand and to ultimately, also step into a new paradigm of how we do business. That's less extractive and more generative and giving. And then I'll take you through a series of questions to really unpack in more depth. Okay, like why are you doing this community, and who are the people that you could connect with to make it grow. And then at the end I will show you the tech setup that we are using to nurture our communities. And maybe a thing from the very start is like community is a bit like growing a tree or nurturing a garden. It's not really a hack to build business, but it's ultimately really a commitment. And so finding a question or transformation that you're really interested in is absolutely key, because that will then allow you to sustain that experience. About just like building a massive community with like hundreds of thousands of people, but more like really well-aligned people with whom you can kind of grow into depth. So what we'll cover is really the age of community-centric business, and then how can business become more a vehicle of self-actualization and creating beautiful transformations in your clients and ultimately the people within your community. And then we'll look at how we can build authority and strategic partnerships, because that was also something that Florian, when we spoke on LinkedIn, you were saying like, how can we use community to really build these partnerships? And so what you'll take away is really this community action plan. So these 4 questions that we'll explore, and then I'll sew it together, like how it makes sense and comes together, and then the blueprint of how you can technically set it up. So for me, I've since 2008, after I basically left school, I've been building communities, and first sort of like in the humanitarian aid space, and then I went into being in the tech world and building a number of like tech companies, and then really entrepreneurship and kind of like business is really what excites me at the moment, where I'm looking to do a lot of community work. And so within this like whole exploration of who I am, and I got 4 degrees, first in engineering and then towards design, and then ultimately like social design, realizing that the future is really about like how do humans come together. And so after school and while I was studying, I traveled through like 50 countries and had like thousands of heart-to-heart dialogues. And so while I was traveling out in my 20s, now sort of like in my 30s, I realized, man, it's actually really about like the deep inner exploration, and realizing like that even just me as one human being, I'm like 50 trillion cells, and how do all these cells kind of like live in harmony? And then how does this harmony from within sort of show out in harmony on the outside world? And so last year I had my first like 50,000 pound client, which was really, really exciting, because it shows basically ultimately we don't need to have like tons and tons of people if you want to have like a successful business. It really means more like how can we take people deeper so that we can create bigger transformations that are more valuable. And so I contributed to Mind Valley and EverCoach and the House of Beautiful Business over the last years, and it's been really beautiful to engage in these nourishing connections. Now, one of my mentors, Ferrazzi, he's always been saying that poverty isn't a lack of money, but poverty is the lack of relationships. And then with relationships comes money. And that is really very much the essence of this whole community process that I'm going to talk you through today. That it's really kind of, as Florian was saying in the beginning, like let's not look at extracting something, but let's really just look at building relationships and then just be open to receiving what comes from that in the end for us. So, but why is it now really the time for community-centric business models? And I feel what all of us have been seeing, like through COVID, for example, people being kind of cooped up at home. We really benefit from being with other humans. On the one hand, like how they reflect onto us, what we potentially are, but then also it has these like really deep benefits for just our physical health, from preventing dementia to depression, anxiety, addictions. Like once we are isolated, so Gabo Mate speaks about this a lot. So the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but it's connection. And we see so many addictions, not just to substances, but also to shopping, to social media, to our technological devices now. And like, why is that? Because we're not really getting what we want, because what doesn't fulfill us will never ever really satisfy. And so if we just like try to find connection through like a WhatsApp conversation or scrolling on social media, it's not really doing the thing. And so for me, I see having really aligned communities, it's something that nurtures the heart. And because it's nurturing and really value creating, it's a beautiful way to really use as a tool for how do we create value in business as well. So now what I'm looking is like really a business for like self-actualization and creating these profound transformations for our clients. And so the big thing that I found is, man, I wanted to work with people that I love and that I admire. And I wanted to do work that really supports my personal growth rather than basically just building somebody else's dream. And then another big thing was to really turn my life's work, or just basically turning my work life into my life's work, and not just doing work for the sake of work, but really work for the sake of like, wow, this is my mission. And then it was really about being in aligned connection and feeling on a daily basis this deep joy and freedom of, yeah, I'm actually expressing what I'm meant to express. Now, we'll get into the whole community evolution piece now. So, and it's really from building authority and partnerships to then building prosperity. And so how I see this, it's really this pyramid where the base is made up of what I call the community learning engine. This is really the community that's ultimately an expression of like the transformation that you're seeking within yourself and the transformation that you're meaning to create in your clients. And so in that space, it's really about you being the student. And then on the top part, that's the next part is where it's about the monetization. And at that point, you are the master and you can really offer something. And so what we're going to look at today is really the lower part of building out that community, because unless we have that community, it doesn't really make sense to speak much about the monetization opportunities that then come with having a community. So now when you look at the bottom of the pyramid, it's really you becoming the lighthouse for a specific transformation by leading with curiosity. And what I found is it's really beautiful if you want to immerse yourself in a new field and then creating a series of events around it, building this authority, building partnerships from that, and also connecting with people that are looking to do that same transformation that you have just gone through. And then that gives you really the base of anything to evolve from. And then the community monetization, just to mention this briefly here, is when you start leveraging your partnerships and the authority that you have built to turn this learning that you have created into a real business opportunity. And you can do this through courses, masterminds, retreats, expeditions, learning journeys, one-on-one coaching, all these things. Now that we have this, we'll look at this community learning engine. How I see it, it's basically, it's you're becoming the host of a stage in a way. And that stage allows you to, on the one hand, build partnerships with people you admire, and on the other hand, create this community or client base with people that are looking to basically go through the same transformation that you're going through or have just gone through. And those are the people that you can essentially serve. Now, when you look at the potential partners, how I see it, it's really people that are experts in the field that you're exploring, and that are people that you admire and you want to co-create with. And so by creating this stage, you give a like beautiful engagement opportunity between you and them. And then from an energetic perspective, is also by hanging out more with people that already do the thing that you basically want to do, you're just by osmosis becoming more and more like them. And so you're elevating yourself incrementally towards that level. And in another way, you're also kind of this, let's say, energy conduit. You know, you're learning and engaging with people on, a more elevated sphere in a way. And you're bringing that to people in your community that potentially haven't had the courage or the curiosity to lean in and say like, look, I'm going to explore this, and I'm not doing it in private, but I'm actually going to do it in public sphere, kind of like figuring yourself out with other people in front of them. So it's really this beautiful double-sided value where here in the bottom you have the audience, basically the people that are your community members, your potential clients, and then you have the speakers on the top. And so with these speakers, you give them the opportunity to like edify them and celebrate their expertise and experience. And you also give them an opportunity to connect with new clients, to sharpen their profile. And even if because they are also people who are continuously growing, so they are putting out new work, coming up with new things. And so you can give them opportunities to share some new beta content exclusively with your audience and receive feedback. So there's all these cool, mutual value opportunities that arise from these connections. And then on the other hand, with the people that you're serving, you're normalizing the transformational pains and discomfort, because any change is or uncomfortable, because it does require you to like act in a new way. And so you're needing to go out of your old groove into a new groove. And so they're not only receiving super relevant information that are tailored, but they also have the opportunity to ask questions that are specific to them. So it's not just kind of like some off-the-shelf content, but it's like, okay, I have this question and I can bring that into one of these events and then get an answer. There's an opportunity for them to feel seen and heard. I think that's one of the big things in today's society, that we struggle, I feel, as a society, that people really feel seen and heard, especially in the online spaces. But only once we feel really seen and heard, we feel like, wow, we actually like exist, not just for us, but also like for other people. And it's very healing. And so it gives them ultimately the sense of not being alone. And then you also give them that container to be around like-minded and like-hearted people, because obviously like everybody is looking at creating the same transformation. All right, nice. So good. Now it's time to grab some paper and a pen. So we're gonna write some things down, some questions to come up with, okay, what's the community piece that you are meaning to build? Okay, so it's going to be four different questions, and they will build on top of each other, so that ultimately you can go away from this today with having a cleaner idea: who are the people that you want to serve, what is the transformation that you want to create, and how can you bring this into the world. So it's after these four questions, we're weaving that together. So first question is, what transformation do you want to create? And let's really be fucking selfish here. Like, what is the transformation that you desire to create for yourself? A lot of people say like, oh, this is the thing that I want the world to change. And it's like, okay, cool. You want the world to change? Maybe start by changing yourself first. And like, once you change yourself, you can work on beginning to change the world. And it really needs to be a thing that in many ways, your deepest psychological wound is probably the optimal transformation that you would want to create. And the more vulnerability and authenticity you can bring to it, the more powerful this transformation can become. So as I said earlier, in my case, it was that I didn't really have any good like masculine role models growing up. And so I feel I was kind of like struggling through being married, getting divorced. In general, like relationships are always this like struggling thing. And I was like, man, why the fuck is that? And so yeah, one of the things I'm exploring is like how do you actually show up as a man? And that's now one of my projects, just as a sort of like inspiration there. I'll give you 2 minutes to just think through that, feel into this, and then we'll stop the presentation for a moment and have 1 or 2 people share what they come up with. So, because now once we have the transformation that you do want to create, it's like, what's really the goal and the mission and the purpose of your event series? And ultimately that event series being the cadence, what I said in the very beginning, of like being able to engage your community consistently. Because that's the big piece around community. Community needs, on the one hand, a container, but then it also needs like a rhythm in a way. And creating these moments of coming together and that becoming predictable is something that's really important for a community to build momentum and grow. So now that you have written about the transformation you want to create for yourself, it's really okay. What goal, mission, or purpose do you want to accomplish with your series? So how do you intend to serve through this exploration that you're going on? And really, what are people gaining from being part of the space that you're cultivating? So really having kind of clarity on like the mission and the transmitted value is super important. So in the case of, for example, the work that we do with like spiritual entrepreneurs, is for this year, the whole mission is to support entrepreneurs in building new paradigm 6-figure organizations. And then there's a cadence of like meeting every single Tuesday. And then there's a whole event series of like speaking with 6-figure entrepreneurs and having networking. And so there's, what they're gaining from it is like this exposure to like other people who have done it. But then there's also the component of being just around people who are in the trenches just like them. So that there is this feeling of like, wow, we're actually all the same. We're not really that different, and we can support each other by just leveraging up a little bit rather than trying to learn from somebody who's sort of like 10 steps ahead. So that said, I'll give you again 2 minutes and feel into what is it that people gain through being part of the space that you're creating. Now, next question is like, who are the people you want to learn from and or desire to co-create with? And that comes back to this whole thing that I showed you earlier about the stage. So what are basically people that have already attained the transformation that you're looking for? So who are the experts in the field that you want to connect with? And also, who's in your current network that you would like to co-create with, or that already kind of has that capacity that you want to develop into? So that, yeah, maybe have a few people that are kind of aspirational, like, oh, I don't really know how to reach them yet, but I would like to do something with them. And then also have a few people where you're like, okay, cool, yeah, it's basically just a WhatsApp message, and then, you know, that thing will work. So that you have something to start with, and then also something to develop towards. So within the next 2 minutes, I invite you to list out 10 potential speakers for the event series that you are planning as this exploration. Right. Cool. So that's been 2 minutes. Yeah. So while on this question, for me, it's often people that I just recently have like discovered in my exploration as kind of like guides. Now we'll go to the next question, which is the other dimension. So whom then can you invite to join your event series? And so, for example, like which groups are you part of that would benefit from this exploration, or which groups are you part of that sort of like explore similar topics, but then also which people from your network, for example, would your exploration help? And yeah, so I often find myself sharing it with groups that I'm already part of in the entrepreneurship world or like the spiritual world, for example. And yeah, but then also, I mean, most of you, I assume, have social media things or like email lists, like these are all channels that are available to you to share the thing that you want to explore and see like who in these buckets resonates with that. So I often see it a bit like in the tech world, you run these sort of like lean experiments, just like throw something out and see what resonates, and then just roll the thing that resonates most. So I invite you now to list 10 channels or groups of people or like individual people that you would want to share your event with, that you set up. So 2 more minutes, and then we'll tie this all together in a little diagram. All right, beautiful. So now this is really where all these things come together. So when you were writing about the transformation, that was ideally coming really from a place of complete self-interest. Like, what is the thing that you want to change? What's the transformation you want to create in yourself or potentially like in your environment? Then we were writing the second one really much more about the purpose of this event series. And that suddenly becomes much more altruistic, where the energy for doing this comes from a place of like, man, I want to create this transformation because I'm like purely selfish in that sense. But then once you're beginning to share it, it suddenly becomes altruistic because you're making it accessible to others who are looking for potentially the same transformation. You're offering service by creating a space for like-minded people coming together that otherwise would never ever have found each other. And so you're creating suddenly a space in which this transformation becomes normalized. And then you're having the experts, the people that you want to invite to speak at your events. And those are people that have already attained the transformation. And on the other hand, you have your clients, community members, and those are people that are in search of the transformation that you're exploring. And that's really how these four questions come together in this, like, overall driven from self-interest, but becoming deeply altruistic and giving, on the one hand, space to people that can share their expertise, and on the other hand, space to people that need to come together and need one another in order to actually make a transformation. Right, cool. So now we'll get to the funnest bit. We're looking at the tech setup. Like, how can you make, sort of, now that you have mentally figured out, okay, cool, this is what I would like to do, how would you make your tech look in order to make that reality? All right, cool. So there's basically two ways that I want to show you. One is the lean version, so the thing that just makes it work, and then I'll show you a more complicated version once we have that in place. So really the central part is the Crowdcast platform. And so ultimately you can do this whole community thing for like $29 a month. And so what we're using is we're using Crowdcast, and that's a beautiful platform where you can host up to 4 people to basically be on stage, and you can invite people from the community. There's an awesome like chat function where, you know, people can ask questions, and you can have polls and have little call to action buttons. So it becomes a really interactive part of hosting these events where, yeah, you have speakers exploring a specific topic. Now, how we basically start this process, most often I'm connecting with people like on WhatsApp or whatever channel these people are on, basically, to just reach out like, hey, do you want to speak at this event series? And let's say, for example, for the embodied masculinity event series. And then I'm having a whole board in Trello where I have basically mapped out all the months and the specific topics that each month shall cover. And then I'm having this list of basically kind of a backlog of like potential people that could be interested. And when I come across someone, then I see, okay, like, where could they potentially fit in on my Trello board? And then I speak with my co-creators, see like which people resonate most. Then we reach out and we send them a form that we have set up in Airtable. And so Airtable is this basically database type thing. And so you can really nicely organize the entries. You can have these forms that you just send to your speakers, and they fill it out with their name and their bio and photograph and blah, blah, blah. So you basically get just all your shit sorted in like one place. And then from there, you can also categorize it on a calendar view that you know exactly when is what person speaking. And from there, we use Canva to, so we made these, basically reusable designs. And all you need to change is you drop in a new photograph, a new name, a title of the conversation, and just export it. So it becomes a very quick process once all this is set up. Then you set up the event on Crowdcast. Then from there, obviously, share the event with people that you want to invite. And afterwards, we just host the videos on YouTube to make the recordings accessible. Also on Crowdcast, they're accessible. And the cool thing there is that if people want to basically watch your event afterwards, then they still register, you get their name, you get their email address, you can build some cool email lists, whatever your heart desires in that sense. That being the most basic version of the setup. And the reason why Crowdcast is a beautiful platform in that sense as well for us is because it allows to create that level of engagement. And I feel especially when it comes to sort of online community, creating ways where there can be engagement is really, really important, so that there is this mutual kind of like seeing and being seen and hearing and being heard and having that exchange rather than just like one person delivering content upfront. So yeah, maybe on the systems piece, since we're coming towards the 12th hour, I'll just show you the more complicated version that you can sort of like evolve this towards. And so you still have this whole thing with like Trello and Airtable and Canva. Then from Crowdcast, what you can do, you can basically stream that video to a like video streaming distribution service if you want. And so from there, then basically while you have the Crowdcast where this like interaction thing can happen, you can also simultaneously stream it to, you have LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, so that basically at the same time, just your distribution increases significantly. And before you do the Crowdcast, share it like with friends, with your email list, professional contacts, aligned communities on your website, wherever, like doing it like through like Instagram or so we personally use ConvertKit as an email platform. Yeah, or also with LinkedIn, you can find some interesting LinkedIn automations to, invite people to events. That's also something that in our mastermind, which my co-creator John, he has developed this LinkedIn marketing process where, he basically just, shares and invites people to events. And there's tons of basically ways to increase the reach of the transformation that you're exploring, that you're offering. And then also really important, I feel, is the follow-up sequence, so that people that have come to the event or the people that may have registered but not shown up, so that you connect with them, send them the recording or like show them, hey, this is the next thing coming up, so that you're really ultimately, again, coming back to this cadence of being consistent, like a certain time a day, a certain time in the week, so that people can kind of get used to it. Also, like how you like send your emails, for example, so that it really becomes this, ultimately the body knows, okay, isn't it like Monday afternoon is like when embodied masculinity is happening, or like whatever they would make sense for you.
Can you give a concrete example how this works for your community? Is it an event once a week or?
Yeah, okay. So I'm currently having two kind of like hot projects that I'm doing this for on basically my own projects. And I'll give you the example of the embodied masculinity. So we have an event every Monday at 3 o'clock GMT, and every month has a certain theme. So the month right now has the theme of being a man in the 20th century. Next month, we're looking at leadership. The month afterwards, we're looking at physical power. Then we're looking at spiritual power. Then we're looking at financial prosperity. So basically, like every month has a certain theme. Now, currently we have in Airtable all the speakers lined out for March. So the next week is basically the team is going to create like all the covers for all the events. So then they all go up on Crowdcast. Then from there, we will basically send a marketing email to our embodied men community with like all the events coming up in March, so they can sign up for that. Then there will also usually be a reminder every Thursday of the thing coming up on a Monday. And yeah, then we usually just share it on Facebook and Instagram with my co-creator Massimo. And yeah, then on the Monday, the event is happening, then we usually stream it to a restream. Then from there, I think especially for like masculinity, LinkedIn isn't really a very, I think, useful network. So we're not streaming it to LinkedIn, but we're doing like Facebook and YouTube. And then, yeah, after the event, there is usually a follow-up with an invitation to join the men's group that is part of that space. And then also there's a number of retreats coming up online and in person, which will be mentioned in that. And yeah, so that is the concrete way how we're using that at the moment.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yeah, please.
How much of a following or engagement do you go for or not go for before transitioning to these events rather than posting content?
I mean, dude, we started basically doing events with like 0 following. Because I mean, the thing is ultimately you want to build like engagement, and I think I just for me personally, like content is just like, there's no commitment to content. You can read the piece, but ultimately, I think it's not the same level of connectivity than when you actually see somebody like face to face. And also, I feel there's a different level of commitment when you're actually showing up at a certain time. Content could be consumed at any time. And it's also, I think, a lot more distractible. And I mean, it's just been really exciting because I think for me and Massimo, dude, we want to learn an exploded space of like divine masculinity. And so even if nobody shows up at the event, we're still winning because we're speaking with people that we want to speak with. And then maybe there was nobody at the event, but then suddenly the video, tons of people are watching it. And so it's ultimately also, I would say, this community piece, just make yourself a bit like immune from sort of like likes or how many people show up, because it doesn't really matter how many people show up. It ultimately matters like, are you able to establish a level of connectivity? Because that's really from where value and transformation are ultimately flowing.
That's really a really interesting approach to hear, because I haven't heard it in that form right from the get-go. But from what you've explained in this workshop, it makes, and from what you've explained with your own the embodied masculinity, it makes a lot of sense how it's so much, like you say, there's so much more engagement there. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Amazing. Thanks for coming. And also, Craig, did you have a question still? You put your hand up and then down.
Yeah, I didn't know if you're going to do hands or whatever, but yes, I do. I have 2 quick questions. One, can you talk a little bit more about what you found to be the most successful in researching, or not researching, but how do you find potential speakers? What's been the best method to fill out your list going forward? That's question 1. And then question 2, if I heard you right, you have like a weekly event. Then I didn't hear, my audio kind of cut out. What did you say about monthly? So those are my 2 questions.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Let's start from the back and then work towards the speakers. So what I said is that we basically fill out the month, and then so at the end of like February, we're going to send the announcement for March, so that basically people have like a monthly overview. Okay, those are the things that are coming up, and then we do send a like weekly reminder for the upcoming thing on Monday.
Okay, so like a monthly calendar basically, or
exactly, yeah.
Schedule events. Okay.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, we also like announce it on our website, and we have a few different channels where we basically like kind of like directories, where we host our events in spaces where there is aligned people to join. And because this is really important, that ultimately we find areas in which our content or our events resonate. Makes little sense for me to like post my personal development thing into some sort of like accountancy group. Most likely there's little uptake. But yeah, and then when it comes to speakers, it's a very sort of like organic process for me. I reach out to people whom I resonate with, and then if you frame it from a perspective of, look, I have this opportunity, I have this stage, there's so and so many people that are usually showing up to, then you create a really beautiful offer to the people that you invite towards your space. On the other hand, you could frame it like, could you please come and speak at my thing? And basically, offer it from a strength or from a place of like weakness. So potentially the first transformation that could be interesting is to really know in your heart that you're doing these people that are experts a favor. Because I mean, they're experts because most often they, you know, love doing their nerdy research, and they're not necessarily like looking to like have opportunities to speak. And so, you know, if you give them a space where they can show up and you make them feel welcomed and safe and respected, then it's really an offer, and you're really basically giving them a gift if you want.
No, that makes sense. But how do you come across them? Like if it's not somebody that you already personally know, are you looking through LinkedIn or media? And I don't want you to share what, unless you're willing to, but like.
No, absolutely. In perfect honesty, I feel for me, I think it's less important that you have like the absolute like top individual in the field. And it's more like find someone, you know, who is like 5 steps, 10 steps ahead of like where you and the people that you're meaning to serve are. Because that makes it relatable. And that makes it also, I think, a lot easier to basically connect. And so in my case, you know, I'm part of a number of communities in the entrepreneurship and like spirituality space. And, you know, when people post something interesting and I connect with it, it's like, cool, man, let's reach out to this person and see if they want to come and speak. And, or, you know, now that we're starting this new paradigm 6-figure entrepreneurship exploration, I just put into a few groups I was part of, like we're starting this exploration. We're looking to connect with successful high impact entrepreneurs. If that's something that resonates for you, please connect with me. And then there's been 3 or 4 people just coming from that message. And it's like, oh, cool, awesome. You know, and then from these people, more people will come. And so it's ultimately, even if you just connect with one person, then, you know, you could even ask them at the end of the conversation, who are the people in your world that you think are most high signal? And then you get recommendations from the people you spoke with, and then potentially get introductions. And it's really this kind of like network. It's a bit like borrowing in the, in kind of underground tunnels.
Okay, thank you very much. One final question, if I could. So under your like divine masculinity umbrella, from month to month, have you ever attempted to have like a theme from month to month, or a different theme, or is it just completely random, obviously based on who you're able to connect with and line up and stuff?
At the moment, it's very structured, and effectively, just in the beginning of the year, we have these 8 different dimensions that we're looking at. So it was like, okay, just spread it over 8 months, and then let's have like basically 4 months around that. And so yeah, this is really structured. A few years back, it's been sort of like more guerrilla style. It's like, yeah, cool, this person wants to talk. So how can we kind of like create something that makes sense? And it's also interesting. I mean, it's ultimately, you know, it's a good learning opportunity. But if you have the opportunity to, hold a strong frame and say like, cool, this month we explore this, or you could even say like, you make a series, you know, just do it for 2 months, explore something, and then, you know, time box this whole event thing for 2 months, and just for yourself say, look, we run this experiment, see if it's nourishing, see if it's life-giving, and if it kind of sucks the life out of me, then I will stop it. And if I feel something cool comes out of it, then boom, we'll do another 2 months, or maybe 3 months or 4 months. So, you know, that also for yourself, you create that level of, well, I feel safe. I don't feel like you take on this like massive project that basically just kind of like, you know, corners me in.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate your sharing all this.
Amazing. You're welcome, Craig. Yeah, Florian.
I just want to build on that, because I guess you also can start with a format, right? So we both share the community of House of Beautiful Business. And I guess they just have don't know if they have it still, but they had a monthly meeting, which is just one format. And you already know that you meet some interesting people there. So because they just went ahead and said, okay, things that are interested us, maybe interest our community. And we have some music instead, so we really take care about the people and having a great experience for 1 hour. So they don't have like a curriculum or something, or topic. They had a big topic, which was beautiful business, but this is so big that you can just sum up everything at that, probably, and they do. So this is also pretty much, I think. And just to add on this, what you said in the, I guess, your second or first question about the speakers, we did something which we didn't thought of as building a community, which now I know would be a good opportunity. We just had like 3 people wanted to talk to some people in our network, authors, thinkers, whatever. And they really just show up without having anything of, they just wanted to share their story with an authentic question to learn and to really hear from them what they think about actual topics, right? So they were coming up and talking to us for 1.5 hours without having anything out of it, just because sharing. So that's also something we learned. People really want to share their stories.
Yeah, you're giving them a space where they can show up. It's beautiful, and that's, I think,
and
really
sometimes they just want to hear your opinion on that, or if they, so that it's a discussion in the end. So that's also, yeah, good for them sometimes.
Yeah, and maybe also Craig, to your thing, what Florian was just saying there as well, with having a kind of the same structure for the meetings. So for example, the mastermind that we're running, we have like 30 minutes meditation every time, and then there's a certain intro sequence that is always the same, and then it's like always ending it with naming 2 feelings. So if basically for the events, then you find that frame where you always started the same way and you ended the same way, then people feel safe just given the structure, and within it, feel free to play, feel free to find joy.